In today's society, we have the security of food, warmth, gaming, YouTube, and not having our tits ripped off by some nutcase in a dungeon. Well, the generations long ago had none of that at all. The only thing they had was how they would die. In this video, we look at the top 10 worst ways to die ever. And remember, not all of the victims would die from these methods. Their scars would last forever. The first one we want to look at is saw torture. In this method, the victim is hung upside down so that the blood will rush to their heads and keep them conscious during the long torture. The torturer would then saw through their victim's body until they were completely sawed in half. Some were cut up only in their abdomen to prolong their agony. Up next is the rack, a torture device consisting of a rectangular, usually wooden frame, slightly raised from the ground with a roller at one or both ends. The victim's ankles are fastened to one roller and the wrists are chained to the other. As the interrogation progresses, a handle and ratchet mechanism attached to the top roller are used to very gradually increase the tension on the chains, inducing excruciating pain. By means of pulleys and levers, this roller could be rotated on its own axis, thus straining the ropes until the sufferer's joints were dislocated and eventually separated. Additionally, if muscles are stretched excessively, they lose their ability to contrast, rendering them ineffective. One gruesome aspect of being stretched too far on the rack is the loud popping noise made by snapping cartilage, ligaments, and bones. Up next is the breast ripper. Now I've put two into the one here because I also want to look at the tongue tearer. Known in another form as the iron spider, the breast ripper was a torture instrument mainly used on women who were accused of adultery or self-abortion. The instrument was designed to rip the breasts from a woman and was made from iron, which was usually heated. The tool was used popularly in the Free State of Bavaria, a state in Germany, in 1599, and in parts of Germany and France until the 19th century. Now the next one was the tongue tearer. Looking like an oversized pair of scissors, it could effortlessly cut the victim's tongue. Their mouth would be forced open with a device called a mouth opener, and then the iron tongue tearer would uncomfortably twitch the tongue with its rough grippers. Once a firm hold was maintained, the screw would be firmly tightened and the victim's tongue would roughly be torn out. Lovely. Up next is probably one of the most brutal, the brazen bull. Also known as the Sicilian bull, it was designed in ancient Greece. A solid piece of brass was cast with a door on the side that would be opened and latched. The victim would be placed inside the bull and a fire set underneath it until the metal became literally yellow as it was heated. The victim would then be slowly roasted to death, all while screaming in agonizing pain. The bull was supposedly designed to amplify these screams and make them sound like the bellowing of a bull. One that was really popular was being hung, drawn and quartered. During medieval times, the penalty for high treason in England was to be hung, drawn and quartered in public. And though it was abolished in 1814, it has been responsible for the death of thousands of people. In this torture technique, the victim is dragged in a wooden frame called a hurdle to the place of execution. They would then be hanged by the neck for a short period of time until they are near death. That's the hanged part, followed by disembowelment and castration, where the entrails and genitalia are burnt in front of the victim. So that's drawn to out the way. The victim would then be divided into 4 separate parts and beheaded. That's quartered. So no coming away from that one then. Next up is the wooden horse, or the Spanish donkey, one of the torture devices during the Spanish Inquisition and medieval ages. This is probably one of the most gruesome of them all. Victim is put astride, naked, on a donkey-like apparatus, which is actually a vertical wooden board with a sharp V wedge on top of it. After that, the torturer would add varying weights to the victim's feet until finally the wedge sliced through the victim's body. Quite similar to that is the Judas cradle. The victim would presumably be placed in the waist harness above the pyramid-shaped seat, with the point inserted into their bum or lady parts, then very slowly lowered by ropes. The subject is tortured by intense pressure and stretching of the orifice, eventually succumbing to tears in muscle tissue that could turn septic and kill from infection, or by literally being impaled. The breaking wheel was a torture device used for capital punishment from antiquity into early modern times for public execution by breaking the criminal's bones or bludgeoning him to death. Lovely. As a form of execution, it was used from classical times into the 18th century as a form of post-mortem punishment of the criminal. The wheel was still in use into the 19th century in Germany. Crazy. Coffin torture was one of the most preferred torture techniques in the Middle Ages. This method involved placing the victim inside a metal cage roughly the size of the human body, hence the name. The torturers also forced overweight victims into smaller cages to heighten their discomfort as they hung from a tree or gallows. Generally, they would be left there until the crows came to feed on their remains. The knee splitter. The knee splitter was a form of torture used mainly during the Inquisition. It was created from two spiked wooden blocks placed in front of and behind the knee. The blocks were connected with two large screws. When turned, the blocks would close towards each other, destroying the knee underneath them. This method was used to render the knees useless. The number of spikes on the block would range from 3 to 20, depending on the captive. One of the last ones is, of course, head crusher. This metal device featured a plate that sat below the victim's jaw, which was connected by a frame to the head cap. As the torturer slowly twisted the handle, the gap between the head cap and plate decreased in width, causing crushing of the skull and facial bones, including teeth and jaws, and ultimately inducing death. Even if the torturer stopped before death, permanent damage to the facial muscles and structure would occur. The victim's head would slowly be crushed, killing the victim, but not before the victim's jaw had been crushed and their eyes had popped from their sockets. Although that is already 10, there was one more I wanted to add. Impalement. Given his name, it should come as no surprise that this was the most favoured method of execution by Mr. Vlad the Impaler in 15th century Romania. The victim was forced to sit on a sharp and thick pole. When the pole was then raised upright, the victim was left to slide down the pole with their own weight. It could take the victim 3 days to die using this method, and it has been said that Vlad once did this to 20,000 people, all while enjoying a meal. That's quite a big meal. Anyway guys, please feel free to leave me a comment, a like and a subscribe for more awesome content. And remember guys, keep it surreal. Bye.